Oh, yes. Episode 103. Thank you guys for joining. We have the one and only, very special guest, Timothy Graham Shieff, on today's episode, talking about everything from the way of the rope, how he adopted it from David Weck, his Rediscovering Human podcast, which has recently put out several episodes, his journey through parkour into spirituality and faith and how they've related, and everything in between. So much love to you guys as listeners. Much love to Tim for joining us and sharing his insights and wisdom. And I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Here we go. I've been following your journey, obviously, for a while. And you obviously had a huge impact in the world of parkour. And, you know, I was just telling in my last episode, I was talking to Nate Weston. And I was just telling him, like, you know, I want to touch base with Tim because despite, you know, you not necessarily being as involved in this community as much, like in my life, you still hold significance, and I'm just been interested to follow your journey just because of the impact that you had in one domain to me. And I know that not everyone feels this way. I'm just, you know, it doesn't take anything away that now that you've moved into a different area, a different domain. So
thank you, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, no, like parkour has always got a huge part in my heart, and it's not that I've left the community because I don't care or don't want to do parkour. I've just been on a quest of honoring my body and the years of parkour, because it's such a sport that it's a discipline, but yet there is no form training where you have in martial arts. And because of that, it's the luck of the draw to some degree for those that are able to age with parkour gracefully and those that aren't. And it fundamentally, what I've acknowledged is it comes down to the biomechanics of the student or of the athlete. And for me, my biomechanics were quite poor, if I'm honest, probably because of it's hard to identify from childhood doing lots of handstands without form, without acknowledging the body's pathways of natural core strength, and just actually developing muscles rather than this natural ability that gymnasts kind of follow. If I'm jumping kind of right into it, but essentially, essentially, I think it built some imbalances in my posture, and which had leaked over to how I moved in my biomechanics. So for a short period in my 20s, I was able to throw handstands to feet to gainers off ledges and land with my feet duck-footed and not notice the impact of it at the time. As you age with these things and you try to do the same thing slowly, the issues have a louder and a louder voice. And so that set me on the path of looking into biomechanics. And I've always loved mathematics and I've always loved movement, and it's just the perfect blend of the two, because biomechanics, for those that don't understand that word yet, I think it's kind of like the word mobility is quite popular. It's gained in the last few years a lot of popularity, and I think biomechanics will be the next word that follows like that, where it's essentially the mechanics of the human body. Just like a car has certain mechanics with the wheels and the axle and the gearbox and everything, the human body has its own mechanics. And there's a lot of different practices and systems that are coming to acknowledge certain commonalities between how all humans should move with the muscular and skeletal system combined. And then later on, starting to understand the fascia, which is a more recent thing. But yeah, essentially, my journey through parkour led me to some niggling injuries and issues that I didn't want to just ignore. I wanted to kind of face and try to solve. And in solving it, I can hopefully help myself to enjoy an older age with more freedom and movement in my body, but also help others who may have done the same thing either through parkour or whatever sport they've chosen to do. Unfortunately, without any understanding of form or biomechanics, we just have this position, and I wanted to help myself and help others with that. So that's kind of my journey since then.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And definitely with your generation, there was even more risk, you know, to having those proper biomechanics. I think as we get more educated and we see more movers at the elite level and what takes a person, you know, gracefully through their decades in the sport, you can more easily identify, right? You know, what's working, what doesn't. And
it's
obviously
really
there's
to observe. Yeah. It's interesting to observe from the sidelines.
Oh yeah.
And to see that stuff in the different athletes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I definitely had some genetic gifts and, you know, hindrances as well, where I'm lucky to be moving and still participating in some pretty ballistic movements and enjoying, parkour to a degree that, is similar though with your path. I've taken a lot of different avenues in the last couple of years to make sure that I'm still progressing and making myself healthier, stronger. And, I've had to pull back on lots of different types of movement and just become more and more keenly aware of what am I using? How am I using it? The biomechanics, I haven't really, mined that word yet in that whole domain exactly, but I've definitely been exploring.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially, you don't need, it can be different language for the same thing, but as long as you're training mindfully and honoring your body and your future self, and not just this reckless, 3 to 5 years you can get out of it. That's the hardest part, because I came in that generation, and I probably have got some something to atone for, in a sense that I came into the competitive era and was part of this birth of that competitive era, and that definitely, it took from the purity and the essence of what parkour was, which was these strong male athletes with not much ego to a degree, the Yamakaze and the David Bell and Sebastian, the way they trained, to being caught up in the competitive element of the whole thing, where ego is involved and you're doing things for camera or for competition, and that completely changed the essence of what it was, and it changed the enjoyment of what it was, and it made the risk far greater as well for many people. And it's nice to see someone like yourself on Instagram, and the others coming through, like Shane Parkour is pretty cool to witness, who, even though he's doing it for camera, there's still a purity to the movement. Stora, always kept less competitive and a more explorative angle, and I think that's what there's a spirit with which that's recognizable, and that transcends just parkour itself, which is why Yamakaze transcended, and why I think Stora are transcending now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Oh, man. Can I ask you a question real quick? Because it brought up something a long time ago. When I was first getting into my first year of parkour, I actually tore my meniscus. Actually, I tore my meniscus in my right knee when I was 14, snowboarding. Terrible biomechanics. Had my board set up to be all steezy or whatever. And anyways,
that would do, right?
Yeah.
Ego.
And then I tore it every year since then, until finally I had one of these bucket handle tears and I didn't even know what was going on. I would just straighten my leg out and I would kind of hear a little pop, and I'd be like, oh, I feel like I can move again, but I just knew it wasn't good. But ignorance was bliss at that point. And so eventually it tore in a way that I couldn't ignore it. And I couldn't just put my knee straight anymore either. So long story short, I had that meniscus removed. But one of the things that kept me involved and motivated was, I heard, and I have no idea if this is true, so I'm excited to find out, is that you had your menisci removed in your knees. And I was like, oh, if Tim can do it, I can do it. He's still going, and I want to go too, because sorry, that's my phone.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, so it's true. I tore the meniscus in both of my knees and had surgeries on both of them. And actually, funnily enough, my knees are one of the best parts of my body right now, even though I've had 3 knee surgeries throughout the years. I feel like my journey of biomechanics is, because often, like we talked about with the teeth, where you talk about the root canal is working on the symptom. My knees were like the end of the chain of the issue, and often a knee issue is a hip or ankle issue, because it's just floating in between the hip and the ankle, which are more mobile joints, whereas the knee is just kind of a linear moving joint. And my knees feel pretty good at the moment, but it's my ankles have been the main issue. And I think the ankles, because I'm quite flat-footed without an arch, trying to develop an arch, there's not, I mean, there's systems that talk, like Foot Collective, talk about feet and stuff, and other systems that just don't really seem to have the right approach to the feet. Is not that, in my experience, has worked, but I'm working on some stuff now that I find quite fascinating. But yeah, essentially, I had knee issues. My knees feel pretty good at the moment. It's the next chain of command that I'm trying to work through before,
No, that's where I've landed as well. Is my knees okay when I focus on my hip and my ankle, and the the knee that still gives me trouble every so often, it's because I still have work to do, in those two areas. And I don't know what happens with soft tissues and things. I mean, they told me, of course, that like, oh, once it's gone, it's gone. But the
with
more
meniscus, they say, when you 40, you might have problems and stuff like that. But I literally with the knees, because I want to share this just to give other people hope, because I've several times been really depressed about anyone that's had any issue that's like lasts for months or years. It's so depressing, especially if you love movement like we do. Changing my diet was a massive one for my knees, and actually just removing so much of the processed junk, the sugary drinks. I have to remove bread from my diet. Like, not everyone might have to do that, but for me, I have to take gluten out of my diet. Eating whole foods, dropping all the sugary snacks and the rapeseed oil, or you call it canola oil, I think you call it. All the nasty vegetable oils. Changing my diet if I eat badly, my knees flare up quickly. But if I eat good, I don't even notice them. So there's one thing where if people never change their diet and they go through all these surgeries, it just may not be that necessary. And so that's just, if anyone's got that issue, just please look at diet before.
Yeah, I second that. I champion that as well, for sure, because that's one of the biggest things that's been the gift of working at this new facility, is really understanding what inflammation is and why it is. And like you're talking about, the inflammation is what gives people pain and problems with their joints so much worse in so many ways sometimes than they ever realize. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're back. So I don't know if my internet.
It's all good, but I've noticed.
Inflammation is it's so huge, and it's just so much of it starts with the digestion, right? With stressing the digestion system out, and the gut microbiome, and if we can start to fix that, a lot of the rest of the body can start to flourish as well. Yeah.
There's no, I like that store has their new line is no stone unturned, in their clothing line that they just dropped, because that's really how you have to look at the body, and that's all connected. And so a gut issue is actually going to potentially contribute to your knees hurting, and you wouldn't think
that quote. That's good.
Yeah.
No stone unturned. I definitely apply that to life. Like, even the ones where you're being taught growing up, don't look under that. We've already looked under that. Like, revisit those ones as well.
Well, good. I'm glad I didn't have false inspiration. Actually, it wouldn't have mattered either way, right? But
it worked. Placebo is a real thing,
Yeah, and I think that my soft tissues can potentially, and maybe even already have, regrown to a degree because
I believe that. Yeah,
like, I have a lot, especially because every step of my health journey has been sort of an authoritative voice telling me something that later I found out I could will myself through, or I found different information. And so you have to be really careful what, idea you adopt, because it can really trap you. And I've been fortunate enough to break through enough of those that now I have a really healthy trust in like what I can at least experiment with, and I don't have to take on some of them.
I think that's such a true statement that I've definitely lived with as well. Is just not to accept this like woe is you for the rest of your life now, because the problems don't, like, we are meant to be able to solve our issues, and if we are paying attention to life and to our own addictions and habits and emotional issues, we can absolutely work our way through these, and we can become better, more grounded humans for it.
Yeah, I really agree. So that would lead me, I guess, I wanted to touch on the rope and David Weck, and your relationship with him, because we saw your rope. The Way of the Rope came out, and that was like one of the, I don't know how that necessarily came to be, but I followed, your journey through that a little bit, and now it's like a really, it's a prominent part of your life, it seems. And can you, and I've actually, and I think I sent you a message a while ago, I've been using the rope for I don't know how long, like at least a year and a half, 2 years maybe. I really got into it when it first dropped, because again, I was like, well, I don't just discount somebody because they're not necessarily doing the thing I'm doing. So, and it's really been helpful, and one of the things that I really enjoyed about it was, and the concept was very true to me in that era, and it still is balancing your left and right hemispheres, balancing your left and right sides of your body, just like getting unification across all polarities and integrating things. And I felt like it was intuitively made sense that you'd want something that has that kind of innately built in. So
Yeah.
please, if you could just kind of describe like how that came to be and maybe where you're at with the rope these days, and
Yeah.
how you
Dude,
kind of adopted it from David Weck, because it seems like it was something that you guys collaborated on at first, at least.
yeah, no, that's great that you recognized something and gave it a go. And I think anyone that with the rope that's picked it up for 2 or 3 sessions certainly feels the something profound that they didn't even understand going into it. It it blew their expectations a little bit. That's how I found it anyway. So getting into biomechanics led me almost firstly to functional patterns, and I dived into that quite deeply and did one of their courses in person, and quickly got banned from that practice. And so I was looking out what else is there that's talking about the human gait cycle and locomotion as sort of the blueprint to run everything through with biomechanics. And so the only other one that came to me was Weck Method. And I saw David Weck on Instagram, and he was wearing like 2 or 3 pairs of glasses, but he was talking with such conviction, and some level of some confidence, but not arrogance, that I really liked. And he's came across as such an oddball, but I've always had an ability to, or an affinity to people like that, who on the surface, most people would just think they're crazy, and actually that's like no stone unturned. Those are the stones that you want to look under, right? The ones that are thinking differently, because if you follow the rest of the pack of society, it's almost lemmings off a cliff at the moment. And so saw his stuff online, and I really like the pulses. They're like 2 packs of Mentos or something, and when you run, you pulse them down. And I was like, oh, that kind of I could see what he was talking about. So I thought, he's got a different theory on running. What have I got to lose? So I've literally flew to San Diego to do a Weck Method qualification course with them, a 3-day course. And then as part of that, the 3 main principles they have is the coiling core, which is this concept that when we move and run, there's a certain, not only a rotation, but like a tilt that goes with that, which makes us coil on one side. And that's what fuels the sprinting effect. And that's why Usain Bolt, when he runs and has the world record, has this gyroscopic tilt in his shoulders, whereas the American athletes have this completely level shoulders, and they swing their arms and they can't keep up with him. So the theory and the proof kind of seems sound. And so there are 3 principles of the coiling core, the pulsing, and then the rope. And when I first saw the rope online, I just overlooked it. I didn't quite get what it was about, but within 5 minutes of them teaching it to me, like, I had one of the biggest aha moments of my life. Because when we move with a natural cycle, our rib cage would do this figure of 8 pattern with the gyroscopic tilt, like Usain Bolt runs with this on this infinity path. If we're moving the way we're optimally designed, if you see a tiger moving, its shoulders rock and roll, it's that kind of way that we're designed to move as well. And literally holding the handles of a rope, handle in each hand, and swinging it in this underhand motion teaches your spine that motion, and you're able to get hundreds, if not thousands, of repetitions in a very short space of time. So it becomes second nature to move that way. It strengthens a lot of the core muscles that stabilize the spine to do this pattern as well. And that's just one aspect of it. There's so many aspects, like you mentioned, the left and the right side of our body. I believe we're meant to be at least a lot closer to ambidextrous than we allow ourselves to be. We're taught from a very young age, you're right-handed, and therefore we only use that hand for everything, and our other hand just atrophies in its ability and potential to serve us. And one of the huge lessons in the last few years for me is that the more we strengthen and work on our non-dominant side, that our dominant side improves as well. And it's incredible when they witness that. You can do it through learning to write left-handed, or just practicing skills with your left hand. The right hand just improves as a byproduct. It's incredible. And that's what I witnessed with a lot of MMA fighters, those that can switch stance and you don't know which stance, like Max Holloway, who's both stances, you don't know which one's his main stance. Somewhere through the practice of being able to train on the other side has made his original side better, and they've both kind of morphed. And so anyway, because the rope, you're holding a handle in each hand, and you've got this rope connecting the 2 points, you've got a complete circuit. You've got from hand through the arm, through the chest to the other hand,
Mm.
which we all move with, but my right hand and my left hand can move it out, not in unison. They can move separately from each other, and it doesn't matter. So when I'm running, I might have, millisecond timing out, but disproportionate swing on my right and left side. Whereas once you hold the rope handle in each hand and you swing the rope, you're completing that circuit with the rope. Your left and your right hand are now talking to each other, and they can't act out of unison without causing knocking the other hand out of unison. So you learn to sequence the movement of your left and the right side of your body in perfect harmony. Because if you're not in harmony and discord, the rope ends up hitting yourself, you smack yourself in your leg or whatever. And so quickly, without even having to think too much, if you just practice the patterns with the rope, the body learns, it attenuates perfection by itself without thought. It just becomes more efficient, and it moves with greater ease, and it spreads the movement patterns more evenly out throughout each joint as you go. And so that is one of the greatest things that I discovered with the rope, was just that left and the right hand are talking to each other down the rope, not just through the body. That additional bit of feedback is wonderful. And the real beauty of what WEC does is everyone is looking for greater technology to lead us to this next, human locomotive, Nike with all their carbon fiber shoes that everyone's going into now.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure no doubt there's all steroids businesses that are trying their best to create a better steroid and stuff. And there's that whole path and push in that direction, and the metaverse and all this stuff. And do not overlook the potential for simple, creative, playful tools to be the true things that come through that help us to transcend to better movement. And that's where WEC works, in this playful realm that most people would overlook. And it's so cool to witness and to be a part of,
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah, I've definitely felt like it just polishes those corners into like curves, in my movement. And yeah, it's a great tool, and I still enjoy it. Sorry.
Well, I saw you on it, like you said, a year or so, or more than a year ago. And recently I've been tagged by a few more parkour gyms and things like that, and sending me messages of appreciation for the rope. And it's just so cool to see some of the parkour community start to adopt it as a practice. Because I always remember things like kendama was quite a popular tool.
Yeah.
And that's great because that's proprioception, and practice that with your left hand as well. But yeah, it'd be cool to witness. And I don't really doubt that it will happen when I think about it. But I think the rope could definitely parkour. A certain type of parkour athlete will definitely take to the rope, and it could grow in that community.
Yeah, in every community, I think could benefit for sure. Like I use it when I go to the bike park. I've been riding dirt jumper bikes lately as another just activity to keep me sharp and keep me engaged, and to challenge my my fear. That's something that I can still be scared of, is going off a jump. In the physical realm, there's lots of other more kind of important fears and priorities that I address, but in my play time, that's one of the things I like to do. But I always like to warm up with the rope before I get on the bike, because again, it kind of gets my body more unified and working together, and that'll help me not pull unevenly off the lip of a jump and then potentially fall. So
yeah,
and people are, it's great. I actually don't want the attention, but I love just like turning heads sometimes with it too, because people are like, what the hell is this guy doing? When I mean,
in 5-10 years, all athletes, that's cool. I've never heard someone say using it for dirt bike jumping, but it makes sense. And I think all soccer players will warm up on the pitch, and tennis players, like it's a great warm-up tool before you go for a run, get the spinal engine.
It's so it's just so easy. It's so easy to pick it up, and get a warm-up that's thorough.
Yeah,
and activates
it's energy. It builds your energy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't take from you, and it's non-impact. So
and I can throw in some skips and some doubles and whatever if I want to make it more aggressive, but it's totally unnecessary. Yeah, so much appreciate that.
No worries.
All right. So next, obviously you've actually put out a few episodes recently, and so you've kind of have a new channel or a new, series called Rediscovering Human podcast. Yeah. And I wanted to just see if you wanted to share something on that, and like what's what that project is about,
Yeah.
and where you're going with it.
Cool. Thanks, man. Yeah. So it was funny because I literally thought of the phrase, because that's kind of feels like the journey I'm on. I called myself Human Timothy on Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just about people call themselves, I don't know, certain names, words they put before their names
Mm-hmm.
to sound braggadocious or something like that. And I just thought, or even the fact that names change over time, like I was Livewire and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Forgot
thought the
almost.
one thing that's constant is that I'm a human. Like that's not going to change, at least in this life. Well,
Yeah.
I don't see. Yeah. So the constant is that I'm a human. So I call myself Human Timothy, and then through that kind of birth, you kind of put a spell on yourself in a way, because then you kind of create a realm that you end up working within that you're not aware of in the foresight with
Mm.
foresight, and so I'm kind of like felt like a human on this journey, and parkour is a huge part of that. Life's like diet is a huge part of the human journey.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of witnessing and recognizing that most of there's a real attitude of kind of arrogance of the modern times, that we're more advanced than we've ever been in the past. And yet for me, advancement would mean that we're happier and healthier. That's the logical
Mm-hmm.
advancement that we're all after. And yet it feels like we're actually further from that, and we're kind of blinded by our own facade of, well, we've been to the moon, and we've got access to all this food and technology and everything like that. So therefore we're more advanced, right? So then we'll just keep going down this path. And then for me, it's just like we're kind of losing what it's meant to be human. Like, what are we meant to be here for as a human? Like, can we rediscover the roots? Like, can we rediscover some semblance of, I just believe we are operating at such a lower level than our potential. And I want to try and find how we can, like, biohacking. I don't really like the word biohacking. He says in his orange glasses, right? Looking like a biohacker. But the goal essentially is to tap into our true human potential and thrive and learn all the lessons that come with that, of togetherness and compassion and love and whatever cliche it may seem. But essentially that is part of that human journey. So the Rediscover Human podcast was essentially a platform I created with my friend Josh before, because randomly his girlfriend was going through my Instagram and they'd come up with the phrase Rediscover Human for their keto bar line.
Oh, cool.
And it was a caption on one of my pictures, and so we'd both come up with the same phrase around the same time, which was quite funny. So we did a podcast together, and we've both moved to different parts now, but he's allowed me to carry on the name with the podcast. And so it's kind of become a solo podcast now, which is certainly, it's started as a bit of a challenge, and I feeling more and more confident as I go, but I have to do a lot more prep work for each episode. But I am sharing what I feel are the most important discoveries for my life that I believe can help other humans in the journey of being a human, like, and in the times when there's a lot of misinformation, despite my stuff would probably be flagged by them as misinformation. I would love to flag them as misinformation. Anyway, that journey has led me to one of the greatest discoveries lately, if I can share, is just learning about the afterlife, which is something that I think most people would feel, how can you know, or it's just mythology, or who really knows that stuff. And that certainly would be the case if you only take your information from the main narrative. But if you research, you start to recognize enough different sources, completely no relation, from different time periods, from hundreds of years apart, from completely different sources from different parts of the world, all seem to be coming up with very similar stories of the afterlife and the spirit world and how it works and how that functions. And so part of my journey is to understand the spirit world and essentially we have a human body, the physical body, which we're all in here now, the spirit body, which is when we sleep, or people astral project and out of body experiences in the spirit body, and then the soul. When we die, we just lose our physical body and we move into us just functioning as a spirit body. And there's a whole world where we can operate within the spirit body. And some people, when you sleep, there's kind of two states. You've got the dream state, which is all made up in your head, but to draw emotions that you need to access. So when you wake up and you've got a feeling, you can't quite remember the story, but you have an emotion linked to the dream. That's what you're meant to do, is to get to that emotion to help you grow, because it's through the emotions that we do the healing. But there's also the sleep state, which most of us don't really remember as much. But sometimes when our dreams felt like they were really real, that was when we were in the sleep state in our spirit body, and it is a real astral world out there. And so looking at reading all these books, mostly reading books, but watching some videos as well. But it's really in the books, which is where it goes deep, and reading it. There's a lot of channeled stuff. Channeled is where like a medium connects with the spirit and is able to, if they're able to basically channel what the spirit's trying to share. And so there's books which are channeled from spirits from the spirit world, completely different time periods, like I say, different authors, and yet they all have kind of similar stories. And there's also one book which I'm about to start reading, which is called Divine Comedy, which is by Dante's Inferno. It's probably what people have heard of, from the 13th, 14th century Florence. And that, what I'm just researching into before I even started reading it, looks exactly like just another story that everything else is, that's linked this concept of the spirit world. Now, the work that we do on Earth, how we live as a human on Earth, determines where we end up and what stage we end up. This isn't to say, it's not some Christian belief where if you believe in God and then you baptize and you die, you go to heaven, and if you're not, you go to hell. It's not like that. That would be completely an unloving way for the universe to function. There's real mechanics. There's, biomechanics is a passion of mine, but this is spirit and soul mechanics, which is very scientific, but it takes a different way of thinking to start to conceive it, and it becomes very logical. But when you die, you go to the spirit world, and how you've lived determines where you go, and then where you go, you can still always work your way up from anywhere you are. And so just coming to that understanding has given me so much more peace with this life. And because of the times that we're in right now, and a lot of our freedoms are becoming worryingly more and more limited, in things like travel. Like I might never leave England again in the rest of my life. That's a real thing I'm coming to accept. But starting to recognize, well, and that has definitely triggered me to feel angry and project my anger at certain politicians and police force and things like that for enforcing this stuff. Coming to these understandings that I'm now coming to has given me a lot more peace, and recognize that from anywhere I can either improve my quality of life and my spirit and my soul, or I can make it worse. Just because I recognize something that I disagree with, if I then project anger at it and become self-righteous, then I'm my own soul down with that act of trying to, be nasty about it. Whereas if I can just not be so attached to the material and the physical, and recognize the game behind the game here, the spirit game, the soul game behind the physical game, and let go of that grip a bit more, I can work, and I could be in prison and I could still be improving my quality of my soul condition, or I could be there angry and bringing it down. So that's one of the main concepts that I've dived into lately that has brought me so much peace. And I know to someone, if they're just hearing this for the first time, this kind of subject, there's definitely a first thought in the mind would be to label it as crazy or just wishy-washy or wanting to believe this stuff. And that's how most people will enter this theme. But having delved into it for many years, and this isn't to verify me, you have to do your own verification, and I encourage everyone to do their own research. I'm finding much peace with it, and it's helped me, and so that's what I think the times are calling for right now, is us to recognize spirituality in a sense, and this is a big part of that chapter.
Yeah, I think
I don't know if that was what you were expecting in the response.
No. I mean, hey, I don't go in with the expectations, but I love what you said, and I think, I'm not as far along maybe in this particular journey through understanding spirituality, because I can have sort of like just unknowns when it comes to this stuff, and I don't even know necessarily which questions to ask. But I will.
Well, that's the best
say,
place to start. It's just
yeah,
if you're not interested, you're not. If you are, start with unknowns.
yeah,
Like that. That's it.
yeah. And what I can say is like it's exciting to me because ultimately I do find that especially what you just last said was just like a key that I'm also recognizing more and more as a truth, in that we've come up against, in the same way we come up against our our ego in parkour training, and it kind of like just does not, there's no sustainability there. You can just destroy yourself by like trying to outdo and one up everyone in yourself. There's sort of, if you actually want to continue learning and discovering things, you have to take a different path, and it actually becomes a dissolving of like everything you once knew. And in the same way, I've seen in my journey in the last couple of years the exact same thing, where I've just come up against all these sort of reasonings and paradigms that I realized just had never questioned. And similarly, and I think there's like and again, I can't talk about it so eloquently yet because I am just barely mining the pieces. I've got a little gold nugget here, gold nugget there. But
I like the word mining, by the way.
Yeah, I haven't quite got enough to refine into a nice, what are they called? The blocks of gold. What are they called? Anyways. Bullion. But anyhow, I haven't got quite so much that I can refine into a really nice explanation and with enough wisdom to actually not just feel, but communicate back at, the world. But I'm going there. And I feel like that is so true, that we as a society, we have all these meaning crises popping up that people are talking about. And as I've experienced it in myself, it's been a recognition of the constraints and the prison of certain ideas, which, might be like rationality and science and reasoning and logic, even though like those things are not in themselves. I'm not trying to demonize them. I'm just saying, like, depending on what you think of them as, and depending how you define them for yourself,
it's how you're trained to use them.
Exactly.
I'll put it that way. Like with science, I feel like I'm one of the most scientific people I've met. Now, to a lot of people, they might deem me as unscientific in some aspects because of the way the mainstream chooses to do science.
Yeah.
How is that serving us is not, if in my eyes, hasn't served us that well. So operating from a different platform. But like you say, sorry to cut in, but how you say rationale and logic and science, the way we're taught in school is not in my eyes the greatest way we could use them. And that's one thing. This is why WEC has been such an amazing thing to witness to me, is because it really is the things that operating on the fringe are the things that always make the change for humanity in the long run. Like it never comes out of the core of where we're at until we're all operating from a more loving position. And that's where working on the fringe with an open mind, no fear of judgment from other people, is where the gold is found, in my eyes. That's right.
Couldn't agree more. And, just to keep tying it back into parkour, because obviously that's something we both love and share. That is where parkour was birthed and born, it was on the fringe. And it is so aligned, interestingly enough, with this rediscovering human concept as well, because without any tools or anything to like, other than their own environment, these group of Yamakaze they went with their own body and they started to dive deeper into themselves. And there's a huge theme across, all types of, just throughout history. It's always about looking within, was where you actually find salvation, to use like a sort of religious term, I guess there. But, these things that can't be found externally. And yeah, I don't know. Actually, this would be a good time. There's another thing I wanted to touch on, if unless you have something you wanted to add.
Yeah, just on that, there's just something about parkour, and I wonder if you feel similar. I always wondered how it took so long to be created. Like when I think about it, I'm like, it should have been the first sport we created, or discipline, whatever you want to call it. And so lately I listened to a really good talk from a guy called Alfie Cohn, and it's called The Case Against Competition. And it just talks about how competition literally, even though people talk about, you know, friendly competition, or you need a bit of competition to fuel for growth and stuff like that, how actually all the scientific research shows that competition just absolutely kills the human's natural desire to become, you know, to work and grow and develop at something. And so I'm really in my heart starting to see now how competition has, you know, even my role in it within parkour and in any aspect of humanity right now is by its own nature aggressive, and you cannot do competition and not in some way, you know, if you win, you never really feel any better. If you lose, you feel like a loser or whatever it is. And you can disassociate from that and say, yeah, well, I'm just doing it for fun or whatever. And sure, to some degree, but it's helped me to recognize that even more so the beauty of parkour, because if I was to remove competition, if we were to remove competition from the world, what would we be left with human movement, sport, or not even, but human expression? And you're left with art. It's either sport or art, and art is creative expression of what sport is, very aggressive and one us versus the other, or, you know, trying to one-upmanship. Whereas I think parkour is something that would be left, you know, be left with maybe breakdancing, though they have competitions, ballet, something like that. But and dance, all this dance is a real beautiful expression of human movement. And parkour, like, it doesn't have to be competitive. It's just such an epic practice. And so just while you're on that thought, it just brought me back to the Yamakasi and David and the original intention of what parkour is about. And it'd be great to, you know, to further fuel that aspect of it and promote that aspect of it.
100%. Yeah, I think actually I saw that you posted that, and I saw it was an hour-long thing, so I just looked up a shorter video. So I would like to dive more deeply into his talk and see what more he has to say on that. But I did check that out and I found it was very interesting because, well, one thing I wanted to ask you about that is, you know, you and I are both fans of MMA. We both watch.
Yeah, that's
so
when,
like,
yeah,
I'm like, how do we reconcile this, you know, in our own consciousness and psyche?
So I'm just starting to accept that the part of me that loves MMA is not a healthy part of my own being. You know, that the part of me that watches people fight and enjoys it. The thing is, I don't even enjoy the fighting as much as I enjoy the storylines in like a WWE kind of way. Like the last few cards I've been able to not, other than I couldn't help but watch Dustin Oliveira and Nunes Pena, which was, you know, epic, exciting. The last few before that, I've not watched, and part of my spirit is pulling me to just let go of it. But the part of me that enjoys it is probably an angry, aggressive part of me that has some childhood trauma from. If I truly am honest, and I don't mind sharing a bit of my story, my dad only really knew, like, psychoanalyzing myself, only really knew how to show me love when I was successful, either in sport or in an intellectual pursuit, like, you know, maths exam or something like that. He would be openly loving and be like, so, you know, that kind of feeling I'd get from him, that warm, loving feeling, was when I was successful in sport or intellectual pursuit. So therefore, I learned as a child to associate athletic success with my father's love. And so now is the journey of recognizing that and starting to work through that process. And hopefully that will help me to let go of my, I'd call it addiction to the UFC, which is fed every week right now.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm with you. Like, and one of the things, what was the guy's name? Cohen?
Alfie Cohn.
Alfie Cohn. I think in the piece that I saw, I think he made a distinction between competition in the purest sense is that we strive together, basically. So if you win and I don't win, we don't win. So in order to win, we have to win together. That's like three different. And then there was one that's like, if you win, it doesn't matter as long as I win, I still win. That's a different, like, it's more neutral. And then there's like a more combative, you have to lose and I have to win, like, version of it. Where it's like, I can't win unless you lose.
There was like tennis or UFC, which is where I try to make you lose. That makes me win. Then there's like golf, where you just do your best.
Yeah.
But Whoever does
Exactly.
the best in their own, they can't affect each other as well. And then there was the other one, which was
Then there's
kind
the
of
wave.
what
There's the wave at the stadium, which is like, I don't even know. Sorry, what were you saying?
Mexican wave. You saying or something? No, then there's just cooperation and collaboration, and that's what children in school we teach them to compete when.
Oh, sorry, we lost you for a split second. One sec. Can't hear you. Can't hear you yet. Hold on. Come on. All right, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we just lost you as you were going into what it meant to be cooperation instead of.
Okay, that's all right. Yeah, but I'm back.
You're
I'm
back.
back and good.
You're back.
You can hear me? Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. So there's a shorter video which you could watch where Alfie Cohn is on Oprah,
Okay.
and she seemed way more up for this out of the box thinking, where I think it's completely changed. It's amazing to witness it back in the 80s or 90s. But they paid some children to do $5 to complete a puzzle, and the ones they paid had really little interest, and none of them finished the puzzle. The ones that they didn't pay the money to all tried to finish the puzzle, because as soon as you gave the money incentive, they assumed it was something I wouldn't want to do for free and lost interest. And children are just that bit more free where they weren't as bothered. So it's like as soon as you give an incentive of money or competition, it taints the intention and the reason why you're doing something in the first place. And I just think that it helped me intellectualize and start to understand it, a bit clearer, and go, yeah, you know what, I do recognize that part of me that enjoys that is maybe an aggressive and not a loving part of me that I'd happily work to let go of.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a component there, and to make the steel man out of the argument, because I saw myself doing this, because I don't want to give up MMA entirely, potentially, you know.
I know that feeling.
But here's the steel man argument for you, just to is one thing, and I know this is also at least true to a degree, and maybe it's not enough to whatever get me to stay involved and attached to UFC if I get to a certain level of development where I'm like, I just got to let it go. But the cooperation and the ability, it can, because like you, I like the storylines, and I just like the human spirit on display, and I like that it's probably the hardest thing that I can think to do in many ways is to fight in the UFC, and have to do all these things, and there's just so many factors, and it's such a complicated and such a visceral and raw experience to be on display and put everything on the line that way, that there is this component of, and I don't know how many fighters, if any, adopt this, but they're just like, in a way, they're showing us what's possible just with just raw, human potential. And for me, that's one thing that still, that would be the last bit maybe to die for me on the, of just like the amount of inspiration you can get by knowing what someone can even go through and come out the other side stronger.
It's very inspiring, and obviously people like Rose Namajunas, who have a really pure spirit towards it, and even someone like Dustin, like I was happy to watch, because I feel like his intention is very pure compared to someone like Connor, who I feel like the condition of his soul is slowly darkening, or quite quickly darkening right now.
Yeah,
as it is
it's been hard to be a Connor fan the last couple of years.
It has been hard, but when I tune into like these humans at a more human level, what is it in their past that makes them feel that this is something that they want to do, that they wanted to do? And it will be some childhood trauma that led them to want to prove themselves, or the symbology of the other person being their dad, that they're angry. Like, remember Paul Chek talking about, like, I don't know if it was 9 out of 10, 19 out of 20, something like that, boxers all had aggression towards their father, or and that's what's fueled them to get to where they are. It looks more and more like Gladiators the more I watch it, and the more it's pumped every week, and the more in the mainstream, Hickson Gracie choke, pure, breath work in the waterfall, that side of it, which is very parkour-esque in the spirit. But that's it. It's like when they're actually two humans who are just being paid to beat each other up for the entertainment of people. If you zoom out of it again, because once you zoom into it, it's hard to zoom out again. But when I first watched it, or when you show someone else who's never seen it before, they're always like, "Oh, that's brutal."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, it's beautiful. Can't you see like the art going on?" But really, we've become desensitized to it. But yeah, maybe we've
True.
talked that long enough. I don't know.
Yeah, no, we can leave that aside, but I agree with you. Yeah, and it's evident with some of the stories that come out surrounding that culture that there is an undercurrent of violence and aggression that is just inherent in the fabric of that. And yeah, so what I wanted to touch on then, and I think this ties in pretty well, is, also this is another thing that I know that you're at least aware of because I heard you speak about it once or just like reference it. And I think it's kind of relevant to the conversation we're having is this constant, I stumbled across spiral dynamics a couple of years ago, or a year and a half or something like that ago. Familiar what I'm talking about? Spiral dynamics?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
And I think that, if there's maybe not as many people that are well versed in the language around that, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that model, how you came across it, and then like where you think it's accurate, where you think it's maybe missing things, and just like what, I'm just curious on your take on that whole model, because it's been fascinating.
That's a great question. Yeah, I did find it such a fascinating subject when I dived into it. Essentially, it's a theory that everyone is on a path of conscious evolution, to put it less triggering way, but essentially spiritual evolution is the way I'd term it. And you only really grow up, you don't really grow down, which is one thing which I will touch on at the end that I come to disagree with actually. But that you go from left to right to left to right in this upwards pattern, and we started at kind of this tribal level, and they call it purple, and then at some point we moved to red, which is on each side. You've got the left and the right side. Let's say the left side's the red side to begin with. It's very me focused, and then as we move across, individualistic, then we move across, we move to more mass focused. So the red side would be the way I would see like the Trump kind of attitude, is it conservative? I don't know what you call it. Democrat.
Conservative. Yeah.
Right. And
well, actually, conservative might not be the thing that you're looking for, but yeah. Anyway, sorry. It's just essentially it's red, and it's me focused, and it's narcissistic even maybe.
A bit more narcissistic tendencies. And then as you spiritually grow, you swing to the other side, which is more group focused, and us, but it's blue. And essentially the blue, which is the other party, and it's more us, but it's very rule based, and we need rules, and everyone needs to stick to the rules, and we all need, if you want, and that's essentially where it seems that both countries are right now, in this very rule blue focused mindset. And then then it swings back to left, which is orange again. So the colors change as we move up, but they're in the same tinge, right? So it's the reddish, we move to orange.
The hot colors are like the individual and me, individualistic, and then focus, the cooler colors are more like collective. Yeah. And so orange is a bit more science based, and a bit more how we can use science to help more than just myself, but essentially to use myself to help myself, but to help others with the science. And then it goes to green after that, which again swings back to the cooler color, but a little warmer than just the blue. It's green, and that is more eco, thinking about the earth, thinking about how more, ethical environmentalism essentially is the movement that's a very green thing. So we've got a very blue mass culture with some orange, there's some green elements, but there's also a lot of blue masquerading as green right now, if I can say that, because there's this push for companies to look as though they're environmental without really making any changes, and just to have this stamp of environmentalism. And then after the green, we go to yellow, which is again more individual focused, but still more very science. And it's starting to look for the win-win-win. Like, how can I win and you win and we win together? And then after it goes to turquoise,
And I mean, the yellows, I think I deem someone like Wim Hof kind of a yellow, because it can be more, um, more love focused, but more, because he's kind of coming up with something from his own internal battles in life. He's discovered this thing, this cold therapy and breath work that's helping others. That's kind of his winning for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So someone like him or Gandhi, I deem as someone maybe a yellow. This is just from my observations, from what I've learned from the outside. And then it goes turquoise, and then it goes to coral, which is all chaos theory. I don't know if you looked into coral at all.
I've barely touched on coral because it's just been so unexplored as far as I can, understand so far, that it's like I want to learn more about it. I just don't know how much literature there is even on it. So, and I know it's hard to study someone that might even be in coral, because already if you're getting into the yellows, you're talking about a pretty small percentage of the population just currently.
Yeah.
So to find people, and I don't know if you're familiar, but as far as I remember, like the way they gathered some of this research is they did sort of like sentence completion exercises where they would, prompt some, hundreds or tens of thousands of people. I don't know exactly the numbers, but a significant group, so across different kinds of like countries and cultures and all that. But they would prompt them with half a sentence or a few words, and then they would analyze the way that they would complete the sentence, and then interpret basically and maybe I think there was other quiz questions, who knows, but basically they can interpret a profile of like how they could accurately predict political beliefs, religious beliefs, and just values across these different strata of the dynamics, the spiral dynamic colors or stages.
Yeah, that's fascinating, man. Yes. So the thing is, I think one theory is, well, I'd say the best source of information I saw on this was called by a channel called Actualized, which you might have seen. Leo is
Guru. Yeah, no, that's the same dude I discovered it from.
Yeah, and he's got like an hour or 2 hour talks on each one, and I just was like doing my home biomechanics whatever training, and just put it on and just listen to it, and it was just really like quite fascinating to me. But the coral, he didn't have much on the coral, but there was one interview with a guy who claimed to be the most knowledgeable on the coral. That was, unfortunately I can't remember the name of it, but it was like an hour long, and it was so interesting. And it potentially what might be happening in the world right now, where they create chaos, but for it to find order out of that chaos, or something to that degree, where they create conspiracies, but false conspiracies, to then lead you on a trap, so that you're fighting that while all the while it's kind of war tactics, and it could be used as war tactics. I don't know, but it was just really, Coral was kind of like recognizing that we need chaos to grow, and that was like beyond the turquoise. But yeah, I couldn't share too much on it, because essentially I kind of grew out of it as my main, for a period. It is interesting to observe, because it is recognizable in culture, but at the same time, for my own spiritual development, it didn't actually serve me to grow. And I came to learn that from any position you can have yourself in a false belief of like, oh, I'm yellow, or I'm green or turquoise or whatever, and therefore I know more than other people. And you can there's you can fall into spiritual
number
traps.
Of traps. Yeah, very number of traps in that model. You have to be careful of, especially because it's so convincing in many ways, and therefore, it can be easily weaponized, I guess, in your own mind against you.
Yeah, it's great observational and fascinating to look into, but as a map for actually, it doesn't teach you any principles for your own growth. And that's where to touch on that briefly, that's another thing that the greatest find that I've had of the last few years, that I talk about a lot on my podcast, is Divine Truth on YouTube, and their teachings are, and we don't need to necessarily talk into it much, but the best teachings I've come across for my own spiritual and soul development.
Well, if you are interested, I mean, I'm happy to hear a little bit more about it. I know very little, but I did kind of go through some of their just website, and I followed your podcast, and I just like hovered on it and just looked at it real quick, but haven't had the time to dive in.
So essentially what they're teaching is what I've touched on and shared already, but is that most of our life that plays out as an adult all comes from our childhood traumas. Now, we all have our own issues, habits, addictions, and these can be physical or even emotional addictions. But as an example for myself, giving up food and certain snack bars is and overeating is something I think I got from my mother. Is very controlling, and so when it came to food, this is what happens to a lot of people that getting to eating disorders and stuff. Their parents are so controlling around food that when they grow up and can control their own food, then they end up overeating and things like that. And so that's why I ended up doing like my 35-day water fast, which I don't know if
that was madness. I mean, I'm sorry, it was incredible. I think, but also I had no idea that was one of the first times I'd ever been exposed to that being a thing as well. It was just like people go months or a month even without food. That was mind blowing. So yeah, please. That was one of the most fascinating parts of your journey. And I don't know that I have the conviction and or the body fat to even pull something like that off. But I was fascinated with that whole.
I was desperate, But essentially, that was my attempt to willpower my way out of an issue, an emotional and mental issue. I think emotional issue. I was right. If I don't eat and then I come back to food, I will have a healthy relationship because I've given it up for so long. That it didn't work. Like, and people have that with, it's not an issue have now. That was amazing to notice that dropped. But something like porn, which is so accessible, and people may be able to relate to that one as something where they go, I know it's not good for me, or for the people involved in making it or whatever. In many instances, I'm going to stop now, and every intention after they close that tab and pull their shorts or whatever, they'll never do it again. Or they'll stop for a week, or they get a girlfriend and they stop for a month, and then slowly those old habits come back in, and every intention in the world doesn't change the habit that is bad. This is fundamentally the thing, is we all have our own issues and the habits that we want to change about ourselves, and all the intention doesn't do this. Divine Truth are the only people that I believe that teach the actual method to resolve this, and that is through recognizing the root cause of that injury. That every addiction we have is a cover-up for an emotional injury, an emotion that we do not want to feel, and that when we start to feel it, we go to that habit to stop us feeling it. And if you do stop that habit, you notice that urge, that desire to do the thing, because you're scared of that emotion coming up. Now, the only way to do this is to remove the addiction and then to face yourself. And this is the hardest part, because we've built up so much facade and protection and resistance and distraction habits around feeling our own hurt child emotions. So these are issues that were put there in our childhood from conception to 7 or 10 years old. And that's the path that I've been studying and practicing for the last 2 years, is to start to tune in to my hurt child, to try to remove the walls of facade that I built up, this arrogant character around my hurt child that I just didn't want to feel, and start to feel these emotions. And when I start to feel these emotions, it's painful, it sucks, you feel like it's never going to end. And then on the other side of it, life feels a little bit lighter, my body feels a little bit healthier, my mind's a little bit clearer, that addiction's a little bit less. And so these are the only people, as far as I can tell, that are teaching it this way. Because with spirituality, the danger is, and I've gone down many rabbit holes and mined a lot of information, some of the teachings can teach you to put up more barriers between you and the war. They can teach you to, namaste, love and light. I will just not, I will just meditate my way, and I will use my willpower to get out of this thing, without actually the true path of turning into the pain that's there and facing it. It's just like, I will just act like it's not there, or I will silence it, or try to forget it ever existed. And for me, I've always had this childish mindset, and I think a lot of parkour people may be able to relate to, like, this inner child. And that's a lot of spirituality teaches to suppress that child and to be like this mountain monk, shaves their head, and it's like, I believe we're designed to be individuals and to have personality. And that is the opposite path. That's a way of going, I'm going to remove myself from my injuries, but I'm also going to remove myself from personality and character that I was designed to have. And so this path is turning into that hurt child, feeling and expressing the hurt child emotions, and below that is the real true self, which is full of character and personality that we're all designed to be. And I'm not Christian, but there's some verses in the Bible that I really connect with, and one of them is, we must be like a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. You can only enter the kingdom of heaven if you are a child, and that, you know, don't need to look at that too biblical, but essentially we are children, and all these adults is a trick to grow up in society right now. It's a trap. Don't do it. Like, there's no, and that's why someone like Weck, he's 50-year-old big kid, and he's got that balance of,
and Wim, the same thing, I would say, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Wim's, that's why I thought Wim was quite a good example. But anyway, this is the greatest teachings. It's an education in love, in self-love, in true love, not in this false, fictitious love where love is, oh, here's a reward, you know, treat yourself love. Like, that's, you know. And so there's a series they've done of lectures called An Education in Love, because love is the only thing that's ever brought us happiness and joy, however you've accessed that, you know, through whatever it is, real love. And love is, the lack of love is the only thing that's brought suffering for most of us, somewhere where love's been lost or ignored or you know, whatever, abandoned. And so we've never had, no one's ever taught us about love. We've had some kind of lessons from our parents, maybe, but not many of us, you know. And how much do they know about love? So essentially they've created this series of lectures which they delivered live, but it's all captured and shared on YouTube, which I'm treating like school, like adult school, but to help heal myself from my older, you know, my childhood traumas, which, you know, trauma doesn't need to be something, this is what we need to accept, I think, is that it doesn't have to be a crazy, for some people, God bless them, have had crazy traumatic childhoods with all sorts of, you know, maybe abuse and all sorts of things. But whoever you are, you don't have to have had abuse to be had an unloving childhood. You know, I think I was, you know, hit by my dad maybe once, and it's, you know, I think I'm 33 now. I think the next generation that people don't hit their kids, but that was kind of a bit more common. And maybe there were other kids that got it much worse than me. But you can hit another adult. If I hit another adult now as an adult, I could go to prison. But you can hit a child, and it's I do this because I love you, and you know, that's what the parent would tell the child. I'm doing this because I love you, and they beat the parent could beat a child, and it was okay. But if you hit an adult, it's not. And yet, it's we don't recognize the innocence and purity of children because of our own, you know, dark shades that we wear from our own things. So anyway, no matter how perfect many of our childhoods may have been, even those, there's probably traumas and actions that we're carrying out, these played out things into our adult life. And so this education in love is helping me to study and recognize in myself, and then grow to become the real adult that I could have been had I not been held back by all these traumas and issues that just continue to play out in life.
Yeah, no, I fundamentally, just have to second that. I think that there's actually no one that isn't traumatized, you know, in some way, shape, or form, just because, like you're saying, even just because we're human to a degree right now, that is just like, you know, our parents have not been able to provide, and nor could they. No one would have the tools, really. You'd have to have a really ridiculous.
It's not through their fault of their own. Yeah, it's not to judge that, but it's just to recognize that no one really knows about love, and therefore we've ended up how we've ended up.
Yeah, and so that's like part of our generation is to do some of this new work, you know, because they couldn't have taken it to the level of maybe spirituality, being more, well, you know, it kind of, and I don't know if it cycles back and forth a little bit, or if it spirals up a little bit like that model where, you know, there is like whispers of something, and then it kind of comes into its full expression. And, you know, throughout time and history, you know, and that's why people talk about ancestral healing and trauma as well, because sometimes these patterns are, you know, generations old. And, you know, I definitely could see that in my family, you know, with the way my dad, his upbringing, and, you know, and how it related to mine, and how now it's going to, you know, if I have children or when I have children, it will be a different expression, because we all have just taken a little bit of the load and healed it, to a degree. And you can do some amazing things. And I think that's one of the reasons why we share this sort of, and I think, don't only put words in your mouth, but I think what's so exciting about doing some of this work is ultimately just seeing what's possible for those future humans and for these future children that do not have to carry. It's not that, you're going to be able to give them a perfect life, but you're going to give them just a much larger head start, I guess, from where you were. And that's kind of like just fascinating to think about. Okay, well, this is what we can do now. What will we be able to do when there's just that much less baggage we're carrying and that much more support for people to individualize or whatever, in the way that
hopefully, if we can get there. But that it seems like that's the work that breaks the bonds of limitation of our lives. And if our children can get there and avoid as much indoctrination as possible to a degree, and keep that spirit of belief and faith that we even talked about at the start, the fact that you have these issues but you just believe that you can solve them, that's that spirit that you need. But there's something, and this might bring it full circle,
sure,
for us, and there's something that parkour taught me as a human that that has just helped me throughout all life since getting into it. And it's just given me a certain level of courage that you develop with the physical practice that then has carried over to spirituality and into life. And there's a certain bravery to a degree that I think all parkour athletes nurture, that they can apply to other areas of their life and to grow and be stronger humans. And that's why parkour is such a beautiful practice, and the more we could coach it healthily with some, maybe discipline is not even the right word anymore, because that's kind of it feels a bit unloving, but some sort, to coach it lovingly to children in the right way, an uncompetitive kind of way, it can give them that ability to access that the physical practice can transcend the physicality. Yeah,
it certainly was my on-ramp to, in many ways, this path, and it sounds like yours as well. And I think that wraps it up pretty nicely. If there's anything else you want to share, or let me know. But I think I had a really great time talking with you, and I think we can probably save our evening and my afternoon now for whatever else we got to do, and maybe catch up again soon.
Yeah. No, I think that I really appreciate you setting the tone and creating the space for this conversation and the direction that I was able to talk in. I've done a few into like podcasts recently, but to do it with someone from parkour has actually been really, quite fulfilling actually. And I'm grateful to all the people that listened, all the free runners or non-free runners either way, because I think we're able to touch on some cool subjects that I think in the next few years we may be able to all contribute towards and help develop further, because I think they could help all of us and all of humanity if we work in these areas. So thanks for holding space.
My pleasure, man. Thank you for being you, for being the 2-foot jumper, like the one that dives in head first and pioneers so many trails for the rest of us. So much love to you, brother. And we'll talk soon, I'm sure.
Thanks, Brendan. Yeah, when the time's right, give it a year or two and see what develops, and we'll connect again. Appreciate
Absolutely.
You, man.
All right, brother.
Big love.
Take care. Oh, yes, indeed. Thank you guys for joining us. Big thanks to Tim. Of course, find everything you need to find in the description. Links to all of the relevant topics that I could find. And also, of course, if you want to support the podcast and this channel and me and what I'm doing, go to heightdrop.com. Those links will also be in the description here, of course. And share your feedback. Let me know. Shout out people, and you know what to do if you want to help out and spread it. Love you guys. Take care. Happy holidays. We'll see you in the new year.